every level you go to, there's new things that you have to leave behind. The lowest form of living is to live for yourself. And they're going to see you as their source of pain.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules podcast. It's your girl, Bri, and I'm here with Mr. Adrian Crawford. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. We just got back from Dallas.
We did get back from Dallas working with a client. It was a lot of fun. Like going to Texas. Again, a lot of stuff to do out there, and Dallas is an incredible city. So it was good. And we actually got to work one of our clients as somebody who actually used to work here with us. And so watching what they're doing right now, really cool franchise concept. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a joy.
It was. What was your favorite part?
I have never been to Dallas. And so I was there and I was like, oh, I see the appeal. I see the appeal for Texas. I got to go to this little art museum.
Yep.
Walk downtown. It felt like I was home a little bit.
It was.
The country.
No, it is. And one thing about, being out there in Texas, it's just, again, there's a lot like in a city like Dallas where you got like a city, but then also, you can go into the suburbs, and then if you go out a little bit farther, you got like land, a lot of land, stuff like that. So again, definitely Texas is appeal. I've been to Austin a few times, I've been to Houston, we've been to Houston as well. So again, I like Texas a lot. It's a very, it's different than Florida, but again, it's a great state.
Yeah. I guess the way I would describe it is that it feels like you're in a hometown.
Yeah.
Even though it's really big.
Big city. Absolutely. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite part of the session is, I got to teach some parts of it.
Yeah. How'd you feel?
I feel like it was good. And learning, I guess, bringing authenticity to the process, I guess. Mm-hmm. Practicing communicating, I think, is something that is good. It's for me, it's a necessary evil. Mm-hmm. So I'm not someone who feels like long-term for my life, mm-hmm. being a high-level communicator is a passion or this major call. Yeah. Maybe that's something that will be a thought within the next few years. I don't know. That's just not how I feel right now. And I'm surrounded by 10, 15 people who that's their thing. Yeah. They're I feel a conviction to be a very strong communicator. Yep. And so for me, it's more so I have to learn how to do it well. Mm-hmm. And there's a practical need, I think, within our team, within the topics that I would be the best skill set wise at teaching. Yep. So that's kind of the thing that draws me. But it's odd because there's not much in my life that I do that I don't have a long term I guess vision or push or pull towards. Mm-hmm. And so communicating is kind of that thing for me where I'm I just have to learn how to do it. Yeah. Practically, I just have to learn how to do it. And I can still feel because I'm practicing, I can still feel the the chasm between who I am and how I present myself. Gotcha. In terms of communication. So I can recite information. Mm-hmm. I feel when I get really stressed out and anxious, I who I am kind of subsides a little bit, and then I just resort to communicating the information, which at the end of the day, the point is for them to understand what it is that we're talking about. So that always gets across. Mm-hmm. But I'm interested to see how there's more practice, what it looks like for there to be a little bit more flow, a little bit more. I guess that's how people speaking usually would describe it, just as flow.
I think sometimes what you do is when you're communicating is, you think some people can, like you said, you can lose yourself and just, all right, you can get nerves or whatever and just, I'm trying to deliver information. Other people, you can start to perform and then just not be authentic either, where you're just playing a caricature communicating and you may perform pretty decent, but it's not, we always say, I say it this way, is that the goal of communication is not information. To me, it's transformation. And I believe transformation happens with information, but I believe it's something that's embodied. It goes beyond just kind of giving people facts. People can listen to an audiobook. They can, they can read it on you can give them a handout or whatever, read in a magazine, but there's something about when someone's able to communicate it and they communicate it from a way that is authentic. They've taken the information, they've run it through the grid of the human experience and are able to bring it to real life. I think those are when, really good communicators bring transformation. So, watching you communicate over the last, couple of years and just seeing you take steps and steps have been really cool to see. Actually, I thought you did a really good job being able to, for the time that you had, it was transformational because you're able to take information and actually bring it there. So it was good.
Yeah. And I will say too, I think that communication is something that everybody needs to learn how to do.
For sure.
Like, I think that it's just one of those things that, like, you have to know how to verbally communicate to people the things that you believe are true, the things that you believe aren't true, and how to move people with your words and, like, your presence. And so I think that's something very important for everybody to learn how to do, and something I believe is important for me to get better at. So. Yeah,
I think because, in today's world, and I think it's throughout history, like whoever tells the best story wins.
Right.
And so you got to be able to tell story. You got to be able to communicate. And I think, like you said, right, any level you're at. So those listening, you may not be, presenting in front of people. You may not be on a stage or something like that. But you, at some point in time, if you are, if you're a father, if you are a wife, you know what I'm saying? If you are a mother, you're going to have to articulate something that compels your children at some point. You're going to have to articulate, at times you may go to the bank and you may be trying to get a loan. You got to articulate why you should do that and on and on. So we're always communicating, and I think it's always important to get that skill set to be able to do it, because it does. I mean, again, communication is very vital in moving things forward in this world. So yeah, got to get it.
Yeah. Lately, fun question.
Yep.
You've been on your, what you would call Anglo-Saxon
I have.
playlist.
Mm-hmm.
Right before this podcast, he was sitting in the room over, just like blaring elite white music.
I was in my white girl era just a minute ago. I mean, I was listening to Britney, Katy Perry. I mean, old school, like the Cardigans. Yeah, man. I mean, Gwen Stefani, which was one of my like high school crushes, was Gwen Stefani. Yeah.
I could see that.
Dude, that's what I'm saying, so dude. Funny. No doubt, Gwen Stefani, dude, she was fine. I was just, it's so no, but no, yeah, I don't know why. And again, I've been posting it up on my story and stuff like that, and I do it for fun because I think people who know me know that just the diverse world I live in, and so it's always funny when people who are white say, "Well, we don't have culture." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you do. Like, you absolutely have culture." When you see people jumping out of like somebody sent me a video the other day. So now that I'm doing this, people are just sending me all type of stuff. It's so funny. A guy was in a helicopter, and he's flying over the ocean. And he wants to capture like a swordfish. So here's what he does. Not with a rod or a pole or anything like that. They're hovering over this, they're hovering over the ocean. He sees the swordfish. He dives into the water on top of the swordfish, wrestles it, and kind of gets it and pulls it up as Lauren's dying in the background. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, yo, that is one of the widest things I've ever seen. You will never see Jerome or Jermaine jumping out of a friggin' airplane to go tackle a swordfish. I was like,
what a hobby. Imagine how much that costs too.
But that's what I'm saying, my man. But here's the thing, what made it crazy, Bri, it was like my man came out there wetsuit on. My man was just like in some cargos and like a fishing shirt, just jumped in. I was like, yo, this is wild. And he just did it. And he gave him the white guy, like when the white guy's about to leave, they say, all right, buddy, tap you on the back. Like he like wrestled him, he tapped him and pushed him away. I'm like, dude, he gave him the white guy tap as well. Dude.
Wait, he caught the swordfish and then let it go?
Yes, he had the swordfish like this, he was there. Swordfish wasn't going to go anywhere, and then he let it go.
Said, there you go, buddy.
There you go, buddy. Go back to your friends. Dude, but so I just been posting on my story a lot of things like that because, again, I think what it is that to me it's funny. It also gives people insight into things. And I think at times you need to be able to laugh about stuff like that because I think we take things so serious, especially we're in an election year. And because of our politicians, they draw lines. And they make it racial and cultural and things like that. And so I'm like, man, so I don't know. So for some reason, I'm like, yeah, I just want to start doing this. So I started posting stuff like that because I'm really, listen, I tell people all the time, I've learned a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like I've learned a lot from white culture. Again, just like I tell people and I tell my black friends, man, like I believe everybody's created an image of God. And so I believe we should celebrate all different parts. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter where you come from, your background. I think you can always learn stuff. And so, yeah, man, like, listen, I love music. You know what I'm saying? Just a lot of stuff. I grew up, I learned how to, like Dungeons and Dragons. D&D is a white culture thing. And I learned how to do that. My imagination playing D&D. And so, anyway, yes, I'm in my Anglo-Saxon era right now. Just listen to stuff, all right? So
what is your favorite song?
Dude, I don't know. You know what I've been on lately? This is I'm going to play it real quick so we can hear it in the background. You know what I'm saying? So Lauren, Bill, if it doesn't sound good, you can just put the audio over it, all right? Song by Stained. It's very, I mean, kind of a little bit emo-ish, you know what I'm saying? Or you know what this song is?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Just a lead. Anyway. Yeah.
Okay, can I be honest with you?
What's up?
You know how we've talked about before that, like, whenever you're watching, like, Lord of the Rings or, like, certain shows, this is also one of those things.
Oh, no. Yeah, 100%. Right now, when I'm listening to, like, songs like that or whatever, I am definitely in my dark era when I'm doing that as well. So, but yeah, right now, I would say that song's there. But also, I'm telling you, I am a huge, like, Katy Perry fan. Like,
I love
dude, she's
Teenage Dream.
Yes, I mean,
is a hit.
Yeah, Katy Perry. I mean, she has some. I Kiss the Girl was a band. No, you know, people. Oh, I can't believe, dude, that song's a banger. You know what I'm saying? I have to agree with all that stuff, but like, it's a freaking banger.
I wasn't allowed to sing that song.
You were
like growing up, like
oh,
it was.
dude.
Like, I'm not kidding you. Vivid memory. We're like sitting in the car driving. The song's playing on the radio. It's not that they turn the song off. Like, you guys can't sing this. The song plays, and my brother,
your brother could sing it.
But they're like, you're not allowed to sing it. That's so funny. Somehow I still know every word.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. Anyway, yeah. So I kind of been in that era. It's been a lot of fun, and it's interesting how having people just respond, you know what I'm saying? Like, people just, I mean, it's like, it's now become a thing. Everybody's literally been hitting me up like, oh, dude, I can't wait. They're like, are you going to be doing this every day now? How long is this going to go? So I don't know.
People are obsessed. They miss Meme Monday. I used to have something called Meme Monday where it's I had so many different people. I had people, like, I had professional basketball guys, like, stealing my memes and dropping them on Snapchat like they were their own. I'm like, dude, your boy get some credit over here? You, like, took it seriously, too.
You'd
have, like, the longest day ever. You'd get home, it'd be, like, 10 p.m., and you're like, I gotta do Meme Monday.
I gotta do Meme. And here's what's crazy. I'd drop, like, 30 memes, and people would be like, man, you didn't put that many out today.
Because
I'm like,
sometimes
I was
you
like,
put,
yo.
like, 50.
I know. I was like, dude, that's up.
You would die.
I stopped saying Meme Monday. So again, I kind of, and I was like, well, I keep doing that. And I finally, it's like anything. Once I get to a place where I'm like, all right, it becomes a chore to consistently do it. Then I'm like, all right, it's time's up. So we'll see how long this goes. It's fun right now. So we'll see. So it's good.
Okay. Well, on our last episode, we started something called the origin story. For every topic, we'll start off by saying why it is that we want to talk about that. So what you got? Yeah,
today we're going to talk on this idea of really like the cost of leadership. And it's kind of started because, I feel like I just started, but it's interesting that I haven't. Like, I was like thinking about this. Like, I've been leading, like legitimately leading for 20 years, and it does not feel that way. It still feels like, oh man, like I feel like it was like yesterday that I was starting and doing stuff. But when I look back on it, I'm like, oh. And so with that, there's just a lot of stuff I've realized I've learned. And one of the things that I've been really focusing on is not so much, I'm reading a little bit more, but a lot of my reading is on like I said, biographies and kind of historical things like that. But the thing about leadership, I've been doing a lot more of looking within. And the thing that no one really talked to us about is when you're starting leadership, especially when I first started, it was a lot about how you perform as a leader. Now, we wouldn't have said that. We would have said how you show up as a leader, but it was performance. It was, man, first one in, last one to leave, right? As a leader, you're collaborative. As a leader, man, again, and some of these are very good things, like be slow to speak, quick to listen, all that type of stuff. But what no one really talked about is actually the cost of leadership. Like, no one says, like, oh, yeah, it's like you would hear maybe, you would hear this one, not maybe, but you would hear, oh, leadership is lonely, right? You would hear that part. But no one really dove into, like, man, to lead, the level of things you are going to lose. It is going to cost you not just time, not just money, but emotional energy, relationships, things like that. And there was this quote that I read from an incredible book. I encourage everyone, and we'll link it in the show notes. It's called Leadership on the Line. It's probably one of the best leadership books so far that I've ever read in my life. And it simply says this, that people don't resist change, people resist loss. And then it goes on to say, leadership is disappointing people at the pace they can stand. Like, leadership is disappointing people at the pace they can stand. Because here's the thing. When you lead, you're literally moving people to a place that many times they don't want to go, or they want to go, but they want to go without losing anything. They want to be able to get there as comfortable as possible. They want to be able to get there as easy as possible, as fast as possible. And a lot of times the leader, what you're inviting them to is, man, it's going to take longer. It's going to cost you something. And they're going to see you as their source of pain. And what that causes you, what you lose. I've lost really good friendships because of that. I've lost sleep because of that. I think it's impacted my health. No one talks about those things of leadership. So that's one of the things I want to do, man, for people who are listening, especially my Gen Z folks out there, is like, man, is helping people understand the reality of what leadership is, because that's the real stuff, not the stuff that people talking about on Instagram and all that crap. It's like, no, this is the real raw and cut of what leadership's all about.
Can you say the definition one more time?
Leadership is this. Leadership is disappointing people at the pace they can stand.
So what's some resistance that you faced when doing that?
I think how people could ultimately, what they would be sometimes with me is they would look at me as I'm telling them to do something. There's another way to do it without it costing them a lot, with it being a little bit easier, without them having to change. And when you would challenge someone to say, hey, move and change, then your credibility, your character gets called into question. People begin to say, oh, well, you're just, sometimes people say, oh, you just like to move quick. You just like to see, because me, I like to impact things and change. Well, you just want to see change, but sometimes you're moving too fast and all this. And for me, I used to internally wrestle with that all the time. Like, man, maybe I am moving too fast. Maybe I am doing this. And what I started to realize was that, people just wanted you to get them there without it actually costing them. But listen, to move and to do something, it's going to cost somebody. It is going to cost somebody. And I will tell you, one of the things I did early, it probably cost me way more than it needed to, even though it's going to cost you, because what I would do is I would try to figure ways to absorb other people's stuff too, for them, to cushion the blow of what they were going to have to give up. But what I realized was that if they didn't give up at the level they needed to, when we got to that place, they weren't going to be equipped and prepared to help be a part of leading, moving forward in this new way. And so it costs a lot of emotional energy and a lot of friendships. Some people just, they will question. They will question you and who you are. And here's what's crazy about it. Sometimes you don't even get a chance to ever defend yourself, because these people will leave and talk about you and what are you going to do? Go on Facebook and just talk, defend yourself? Like, it's just not. It's just sometimes you just got to eat it and go with it.
Okay, so you mentioned that there are times where that you would pay the cost of something that you didn't have to pay the cost of, specifically because you were basically trying to pay the cost for that person. Yeah. Like, you weren't being straight up with them about what it took. You would take that on for them, and then it would just end up in a place of disappointment anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So how has that impacted you long term, and how did that hinder the person that you were leading?
How it impacted me was physically, because there's just levels of stress that came with that I think over years just started to break my body down. Financially, it cost. I think one of the things it cost, I think sometimes it cost the movement of what we were doing. I think we could have moved places, and could have even, and again, hear me, I say this, grown bigger, but I think it was because I was trying to do that. And the reality is, it was like trying to think you were Superman, and you can't, no, if you're going to build something of significance, you got to do it with people. And so, but people got to be willing to carry their weight. And so what I would do is that I would try to do that so we would grow slower than I think we probably could have grown faster. And the limitation it put on the people was that they didn't feel the weight of, they didn't feel the weight of leadership. They didn't feel the weight of the change, which at times didn't grow their character and their maturity. I think people stayed very immature because they didn't have to carry weight. I tell you, responsibility matures you, especially when you handle responsibility properly. It just, it just starts to mature you because you got to figure it out. It causes you, it deepens it deepens your trust. It helps build greater connectivity among the team because you're suffering at the same level together. And so I think there's just some limitations on their leadership that I think was there. And I think later on it ended up kind of hurting them and hurting us because as we tried to move forward, they just didn't have it. And then here's the thing, what I was trying to avoid ultimately ended up happening. So whenever you try to take on things for people, you're just prolonging the inevitable. Because what I think you have to do is put proper weight on the bar to actually see what people are going to do. But I think, I say it all the time, you can't lead anything you're afraid to lose. And so because of, I think, some of my, things I've talked about before, my life messaging, feeling like I was not good enough. So that means I'm not good enough as a leader, which means people ultimately leave me. What I would do is I would absorb things for them so that, because of my own idolatry, because I wanted them to be there for me and I wanted them to be around, that I ended up hindering their actual growth. And I think it became, it was toxic in a lot of different ways.
Can you tell a story about a time recently that you've called somebody up and they didn't like it at first?
Yeah. You want me to tell something that went well or went bad?
Both.
All right. I'll start with what went bad. During COVID, there was a situation with someone that, they were... Here's what happened. Every time tough times would come about, they had personal tough times that were happening. And so I always justify they're going through some stuff personally, even though we were making organizational changes or whatever. And what happened with that person, I saw cracks in who they were way before there, but I just wouldn't read the data. So what I would do was just, they're fine. Okay, yeah, that was a mistake. Okay, we'll move over here. And I would just kind of try to I would even put other people around them to catch them and catch their stuff.
What do you mean by cracks? You saw cracks in who they were?
I saw where this person in particular was someone who would, when pressure would hit, they were survivalist. They weren't, one of our values is, we talk about family, we talk about we all we got. And so what that means, you're willing to go to battle and you're willing to not, sell somebody out. I kind of say it this way, that you want to be in a room, if somebody's coming in the room to try to harm you, you got somebody who's going to fight with you, not turn on you. And I kind of saw that in this person where when tough things would happen, they would instantly, they were going to survive. And if that meant rolling you under a bus, they didn't care. And so I saw that in different times, but I was like, well, I justified it or whatever. But man, when it came down to it, there was a really crucial moment and they did the same thing. And it was somebody who was close, somebody who I knew, somebody who was, who I really, cared for and all that. But in the end, it was kind of like, man, they without a doubt chose themselves over anything else. And that was hard because I think that, because there's a lot of sacrifice that went in for that person and things like that. And so I saw it years before, and the truth be told, I probably should have dealt with it then. But again, I think that's the gift and the curse. I can see who people can be, but I also have to deal in reality of who they are. You know what I mean? I think that's actually what faith is. Faith is confidence. It's confidence, but it's grounded in reality. There's a hope for a future, but also you are in the moment. You know what I'm saying? You're not blinded by it or whatever. So that was a negative. I think a positive, I think right now, JT, who's on our team, JT and I have a long history. Me and JT have been around each other since, JT leads one of our organizations called Equal Shot Academy, which is a basketball training academy. And also we have an after school academy that we're launching. It actually started today. The camp started today. Again, I think that, they're going to have anywhere between 120, 170 kids. We're going to have an after school program in Franklin County, which is about an hour and a half from here, with all them. It's crazy. All middle school, high school students will have to go through our academy, which deals with mental, cognitive, emotional health, cognitive, right? Yeah, cognitive health and actually physical health as well. And so it's going to be a really cool thing. But anyway, JT is like a son to me. I've trained JT in basketball since he was 9 years old. So we've been around each other for, close to almost 20 years. And the thing about JT is, he's a hard worker. He's somebody, JT's one of those, you tell him to do something, he'll go do it. But there had to be a deeper level of thinking. JT is one of those people where, he'll run there's a problem. He'll run full-fledged into a burning building without thinking about how I'm getting out the building. And one of the things that happened is around November, there was a real challenge with, I had to challenge him on some things because some of the decisions making that he was making was actually causing some, it was causing some bigger issues. And so, man, he heard it. He really received it, took it on, and he just started to grow. And I'm telling you, man, I've seen over the last 6 or 8 months, his level of leadership. He always had he's got incredible amounts of potential. I would say he's he's a franchise level leader. But, but he's really taking that on right now. The depth of how he thinks, his willingness to go after it, his willingness to count the costs for what he ultimately wanted, him being very clear in kind of what he wants, understanding what he's got to give up in order to be a great leader in the season and also still be what he needs to be at a high level for his wife and for his daughter. And so I've been super proud of him. But, man, it was a challenge. I didn't know where it was going to go. That's the one thing about leading. When you lead people, you have no idea where the relationship's going to go. Because once you kind of draw that line, people can walk away. Mm-hmm. And that's always really, really hard because, again, you've got time invested, people you care about, people you love. You got stories with them, you got history with them. And then you realize in a moment, man, people can walk away. And that's where, that's why a proverb that's really powerful that says, many claim an unfailing love, but a faithful person who can find. Because many people will claim unfailing love until your will and their will crosses. Then you'll see what you got.
I really like the example of JT, and I think that he would be completely okay with us talking about this because you've had such a long relationship, and then we're talking about the realities and the cost of leadership. Is that you've been a part of his life since he was a young boy, and now he's a grown man with a wife and a child, and he's the CEO of a business, and there was a period of time, a year or 2 years, where both of you were unsure if you wanted your business worlds to overlap. Because there was so much tension that was existing, within the future and what you hoped for and, how things would play out, what it would cost and what it looked like to show up for it. And so whenever the moment was playing out, were there times where you stepped in maybe where you shouldn't have, or there are times where you didn't step in and you thought that you should have? Yeah, no, with JT, I stepped in a lot because it's my son. So it's you want to cushion your son from train wrecks. And so sometimes with JT, and I would step in and be okay, because I saw what was about to happen, and I would step in and not let him feel the weight fully of his decisions. And I think that kind of hindered him at times. And the other thing is what you were saying, kind of us counting the cost. One thing that we both were doing, I think, was counting the cost of, hey, if we go into this, because I started Equal Shot, but JT took it to a whole nother level. I was kind of because it was the start at knowing that once he was going to not play basketball anymore, when we kind of knew that he was going to come back, it was man, let me go ahead and get this thing started so then you can, when he comes back, he's got something he can run and go with. And listen, he has taken it to an unbelievable level. But, and I kind of gave it to him. I was hey, man, no strings attached. Here you go, let's go. But one of the things that came with that, I think, with him was that because he was always used to me kind of quote unquote, kind of his dad, always kind of stepping in. It's kind of like the kid sometimes who doesn't know what things actually cost, because you kind of step in and pay for it, whatever. And I think he kind of operated like that for a while. And then what we started thinking about together was man, do we actually, because my relationship with him matters way more than anything else. So we had to come to reality, okay, dude, if we get into this, man, this could go sideways. Mm-hmm. And that would impact us. And do we really feel we're supposed to do that? Because I think that's where I think a lot of people, when they go in business partnerships with people they know, they don't think about that. They don't think about it can go sideways and what's going to come with that. And what do we need to do that if it does go sideways, that our relationship can stay intact? And so those were, I think, a lot of the wrestlings back and forth with him. But to answer your question, I don't know if there's times where I didn't step in. I think most of the time I did step in to try to help. What are some other sacrifices that you've had to make? You mentioned that you've been in leadership for 20 years or so. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the biggest sacrifices that you've had to make? One of
the biggest sacrifices, I would say, and I don't see it's not a sacrifice now, but it was, is when you're going from one level to the next level, the things you have to leave behind. Mm-hmm. So when I came to this place of knowing, like, because you start to learn yourself even more, that part of like my like giftedness is to really develop and coach people to then run and go. And realizing that at some level, that, you know, for me early on when I was younger, man, I wanted to be the one that was on the forefront, man, you know, like platform. Cause, you know, that was during a time of like, you know, the rise of the internet, social media. So, man, everybody's getting a platform and stuff like that. So I was going and chasing that and trying to do it. And again, I don't think anything was wrong with that. But when I started to realize that I would get some traction, but not crazy amounts of traction. And that was always frustrating me. I'm like, 'cause I feel like, man, I'm saying good stuff. I feel like the videos that we were doing, everything we were putting out was great, you know, whatever, but it wouldn't get the type of traction. And because what I started to realize was that, man, it maybe is not for me to be the one that has, okay, oh man, I've got, you know, 5 million followers on IG. But it was the idea that the impact that I was going to have was going to be the amount of people that I've been able to help platform to put on to do that. But that was a death to self, though. That was a death that I had to come to grips with, of that, man, of something that I thought was going to happen, a reality, a dream that I had, an unmet expectation. And so, yeah, that was kind of one of those things. And those were hard because I think you don't know that. You're just kind of going, and no one has wrong intent. I don't think my intentions were off. You just learn more and more about yourself. So I think that's the thing about leadership. Each level you go, you're going to have to leave things behind. And some of the things you have to leave behind are things you thought you were going to have with you the entire time.
What are times that you've made a personal sacrifice that has led to more opportunities within those that you lead?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about like right now. I think, you know, the sacrifice of like empowerment for, say, you, for example, and allowing you to really lead, you know, kind of across all of our organizations, that what that's led to, I think, one, I've seen your growth, but I've also seen our business grow because of that. I've seen the other entities grow because of that. I think we've become even, you know, our systems have become better because of that. So I think that's a very practical way that by giving and by empowering, you know, someone, and again, it was a risk, you know, because again, you know, as we mentioned before, like, you know, you being 24, and this is like, you know, like really your first, like, I mean, major job that you've had, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and you've worked before, but doing this and leading like this, but, you know, and it was a risk, but I saw the potential that was there. But instead of just throwing you out there in the deep end, it was just like, man, I was right there with you, working with you through it. But also, I mean, you exceeded expectations to now where you're able to do stuff. And, you know, it's more of like, I mean, I kind of like watch and lead. And then when we meet every week, and it's more of like, okay, let's see how we're doing, what's going here. And it's more of that investment that way. So that's a very practical way that I've seen be able to do that. I think right now there's like, you know, between you, JT, and Cody, there are 3 really good leaders who are younger leaders who are actually out there making real dent and impact, pushing the organizations forward. So
there like is a risk when it comes to empowerment, but what is like the sacrifice?
That's a great question. I think the sacrifice for me was just, I think one of the sacrifices you give is like time. Because you realize when you're leading, it's going to take away time from some things. You know what I mean? For me, like, you know, I've never had tons. I've never really had hobbies. But I started to realize the only reason why I didn't have hobbies is because I was actually just working and doing stuff. And
hobby is developing people.
Yeah, and it wasn't like, and it's one of those things where I'm not like, oh man, I'm like, you know, I feel like I'm a workaholic and I'm doing this fine identity. No, that's not it. It was just like, man, I really like doing it. But also, I mean, again, I don't know if it was golf or like, you know, I mean, you know, I've gotten into other stuff like lately because I think people have been able to be empowered, but man, I just didn't have time. So I think that was like a cost of like other things I could have enjoyed. I think times, you know, here's another, the other sacrifice cost, man, it was a cost to, you know, I think seeing some of the development of things with my children. I think about my son, you know, he, you know, playing basketball, I mean, a lot of like tournament, like, you know, the championship days on Sundays. Well, a reality was that in deciding to, going into pastoring, like Sundays are big days. So, I would have to, as much as I could, I would, finish speaking and run over to a game, or before I had to speak, I would go to a game on a Sunday. But that's one of the things I talked to him about. I couldn't tell him, I tell people, if you don't want to play football, if you don't want to play on Sundays, you can't play in the NFL. And I tell people, a lot of times I tell this to younger pastors, like, man, yeah, there are going to be things you're going to miss with your family when you do this. And that doesn't mean that you put that you sacrifice your family for but sometimes, there is that you're going to have to give things up, because I think that's another thing that I would say that no one talks to you about, because everybody wants you in today's world. Everyone has an opinion. That's the other thing. Everyone has an opinion about your life and about how you should live your life. So people will give you opinions saying, they'll look critically upon you, say, oh, you missed you're on a Sunday. You missed your son's championship game. You weren't at every practice. You weren't at every tournament. And people will criticize you in your parenting because of that. But then in the same breath, those same people want you to be, this high functioning leader that's there for them. And then that you are, in that, then you're also like this incredible husband. And then you create a great platform on social media. If I'm in the ministry world, you're a great pastor, then you got clients responsible. I mean, everybody expects you to be all these things. And I think that's the one thing that I came to, was like the cost. I was like, I wasn't going to be all those things. I wasn't going to be great at all those things. So I had to make a decision on what I feel like I was supposed to do. It'd be great. And that took a lot of time, a lot of thinking, a lot of praying, a lot of talking to my wife about those things.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of emerging leaders who think that leadership means that you need to be able to give away more than you take. Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot of emerging leaders who are willing to give up more than they take.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, that's why I tell people, I've talked to you about this. You will get ahead and make impact if you are just willing in your 20s to just outwork people, because that is a lack right now. The conversation, and I get it, but I think a lot of the response from, say, and again, here we go, about to talk about Gen Z, and people who listen who say I crap on Gen Z, but this is going to be that. Here's the deal. One of the things that I see is, I don't know how much that's happened to the younger generation, the overworking and not people being conscious of it. I think that happened to Gen X for sure, to some millennials for sure. I think people, and I think that's where, and I think the reaction now, I think from Gen Z, is the fear of being overworked, not that they're actually overworked. The fear of burnout, and they're not burned out. They're not even close to it. But it's the fear of it, because they heard a story. Oh, well, I see that, or they saw maybe the impact in their parents or something like that. And so I think that's what we have to be careful with, is that we're not building things around fears, but actually we're building things around reality. And I think right now, I would have not been and grown and have impact if I did not go above and beyond what was required of me. To become the level of leader you need to be, you have to go above and beyond what's required. Now, you don't have to do that. You can do, but then do not expect for certain levels that you don't expect for certain levels, certain responsibilities. We talk about this when we work with people in organizations and corporate, that we tell them, they want, sometimes people want the same money, same responsibility as the person who's putting in 60 hours and they put in 30. That's not reality. And you cannot expect your employer to do that. I think it's a very false thing that actually happens.
So as a leader, and you're looking, let's say you're somebody in your shoes, and you're looking for more people to be a part of your team. Yep. Is it that you're looking for people who know how to count the cost, or are you looking for people who, and it's your lifelong job to develop people to learning how to count the cost? Because it seems like there's not really an arrival. There's no point in your lifetime where you're going to be surrounded by people who just because it's you don't do it all the time. There's a level absolutely. That we all kind of fall short. Mm-hmm. And so is it just the realization that is something that we're going to be wrestling with forever? Yeah.
And I think, and you have to just realize every level you go to, there's new things that you have to leave behind. And what I look for, over 20 years now that I'm saying, man, the kind of the patterns I've seen. Number one, are they coachable, teachable? That's the number one thing. The second thing, what I look for is what type of resilience and endurance do they have? So I'll look at their story. Like, so for you, a great example of that. You were in a sense developed in a really kind of, though it was like some very unhealthy parts of the environment athletically you were in, but you were in a high competitive environment that demanded that you went through pain to get to what you needed to get. You were telling me, I'll never forget, this was like early on, and you were talking about, when I was at, when you went to Morehead State, and I remember what it was. Like, you had to do all these, I think it was like all these different flips for like, I don't remember what it was. It was like nonstop. Mm-hmm. And I remember hearing that, and I'm like, oh yeah, that right there, like, she'll go through stuff to get what she wants because she's been bred in that. So I look for stories like that. I also look to when I do challenge somebody, I'm like, okay, I think they may have some potential. And then when they are challenged with something tough, do they quit? Mm-hmm. Even though it may take them time. Like, we have somebody that's on our team right now to where it's taking her time, and she didn't have a ton of resilience, a ton of toughness about her, but it was like, man, she just wouldn't stop. She wouldn't quit though, even though she may have stayed at the same level, but she wouldn't walk away. And then finally, she just has built up more of a muscle to now where she's really started to take off and grow. And so those are the two big things for me, man. Like, does somebody have some endurance, some no quit in them? And are they coachable, teachable? If you got those two things, everything else we can figure out.
What creates within somebody that mentality?
I think some of it's how you're brought up, meaning like were you, developed in those types of environments. But also, let me be clear with that, because I think sometimes we could say, oh, well, somebody was grown, in a, well, if it was a highly competitive environment, that man, then they got it. That's not true, because me and you both know people who were trained in a highly competitive environment who were lazy. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, oh, the environment changed them. It's like, no, there was people who actually responded in the environment. So I think some of your upbringing, some of the environment that you're in actually does that. I think another thing, too, that I look at is that, has anybody ever taught them that? If you're like, sometimes people aren't like, they don't have that endurance or that resilience in them because no one's ever taught them that. They want it, but no one's ever taught them. And so I think you look for a hunger to learn. That's why I say the coachable thing comes in, because if they have a hunger to learn, then that can supersede maybe their lack of kind of what somebody else would have. Like, you were kind of in an environment like that, but somebody who was in an environment, but they're actually coachable and teachable, they can, eventually may take them a little bit longer to get that muscle, but they actually can get that muscle because they're constantly wanting to learn. And so I think that, those are kind of a couple things with that.
So you give up a lot of your time, a lot of your money, a lot of your mental, a lot of your emotional energy, a lot of your relational capabilities in order to continue helping yourself and others count the costs that are needed in order to do what? Like, why would somebody want to do that?
Because I believe that is the responsibility of humans and humanity. I believe that the lowest form of living is to live for yourself. I believe that for just your own pleasure, your own purpose, your own job, your own stuff, if it's not bigger than that, if it's not about man, whatever that is, I want to do this because I genuinely want to help people, because I think that's how humanity moves forward. That's how, everyone talks about, man, I want to leave the world a better place than when I came. Well, the only way you do that is not because you become great. It's because you actually help others become great, because it's, it spreads way more than when it's just you. And I think that's the whole thing for me. So I feel like I have a responsibility. And also, my faith really does, like, it's a core tenet, I believe, of Christian faith. I mean, in the beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1, God says, go into the world, subdue it. Go in the world, make something of it. And so it wasn't like, hey, go and just all hang out and really just think about yourself. It's like, no, go and add value to the world. Go be fruitful, multiply, and subdue it. Go make art. Go create. I mean, go give power away. Go create roadways and laws and cities and all those things. And so that's a big part of me too, that my faith is probably, I mean, it's the core push for me to actually do this, because I believe that is the point of actual life and where the world gets better.
Do you think that there are going to be, and this is not a complete thought, just something that I'm thinking through, because there does seem to be a wave of a lack of desire to have responsibility for anything, and almost a disengagement towards levels of having to give up something for somebody else. Like I think there is a desire for service. Like there is a desire for things to be like socially fair and just. But there is a clear line for when that starts to go into, well, that means that I'm going to have to give up something to somebody else. With that being the case, do you think that 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, there's going to be less people with the capability to carry weight, so there's going to be more people who have to carry more than what things might have looked like within the past?
Somebody who I mentioned a lot on this podcast, Mark Sayers, he talks about the different, he talks about the different, he doesn't look at like generations, like Gen Z. I mean, he, talks about that, but he talks about just like time. And, kind of like when you look at like post like World War II, we were in a time of like production where we were just making things. And that's what made America, I mean, honestly made America this nation that was really impacting. So, we went to, factories. So we were producing, cars, and we were producing all this steel, and we were producing weapons, and we were producing, then you went to like the corporate jobs and, and technology, all those things. But then once that got going, then it became about the next generation. And that was kind of like, I think it was like from probably like 90 to like, maybe like 90 to maybe 20, like 2008 to 16, we went to a culture of consumption where it was just about, man, you make all this stuff, you make this money, you're doing all this stuff to now consume. So that's why everything became, especially with the rise of with the internet, you can just buy things just quickly, whatever. So you went to a place of consumption. And then the last thing now that's really interesting, he says we've now entered a time of exploitation to where now it's the stuff that we've consumed is now exploiting us, because we were told that the consumption, the whole thing is, is YOLO, is whatever, it's like, man, okay, great. Yep. I got to live for myself and everything. And now we're on the other side of that. And, people are like, with all the consumption we have, the access, massively depressed. People are still realizing how empty they really are. People see how undeveloped they are. And so now that goes back to your question. Absolutely. There are going to be other people that are going to have to carry more weight. That is why I constantly am pushing for those like who are younger to learn to carry weight, to work hard, to sacrifice now, because one, the world's going to need it, but two, you're going to be someone who becomes incredibly valuable. You want to find value right now. If I was in my 20s, I would literally learn how to work my face off, learn how to carry weight, learn how to lead, because you're going to be in a place to where you'll be so valuable to those. You'll be so valuable that you will never be without a job. I tell my kids all the time, learn how to solve problems. If you can find the answer and solve a problem, you'll be ahead. And that's the thing right now. So it's a long way to get to, your very good question, is that absolutely people are going to have to carry more weight.
How do you, when you're calling somebody to a higher standard, how do you navigate the conflict that happens when you do that and somebody doesn't want to
do it,
or maybe because I'll say this for me, so I want to, but in the moment you could be giving me feedback or criticism, and because in the moment it is so piercing, it comes off as if I don't want to.
I think you have to deal with the internal frameworks of people. Meaning that I can't just say, hey, go all right, Bri, I want you to, lead people better. Like, all of a sudden I'm like, hey, how you communicate, I want you to, be clear, do this, whatever. it's like I've got to get into, I have to look at with you and with any other leader, I have to see, okay, what are the internal things that are hindering you from being willing to experience the loss? Is it identity, right? So there's somebody who I'm working with right now. Their whole thing is tied into how people view them, how people see them. So one of the things that I'm helping them do, some of it they know, some of it they don't know. I'm literally putting them in positions to where like they have to build that muscle of dying to that. So not platforming them, kind of having them do stuff that's in the background right now. Because what I know, here's the thing. I know that this person in particular is going to be, and has a chance to be a great leader. But if he doesn't do this part, he will never get there. Now, he tells me this is what he wants. But because he tells me this is what he wants, I say, okay, we're going to go until you tell me to stop. Until you ring the bell. Then we're going to, because, a lot of times I'm like, well, I'll start trying to count the cost for them versus no, like I've got to trust your spoken word. And then if it's not, then you will literally, I hope that you'll be responsible enough as a human to do that. But you have to deal with the internal parts of people. What are the things? What are the mindsets? What are the behaviors that they have to change in order to move forward? Because what we'll try to do is just like, we'll try to deal with it, cover up for them, or we'll try to give them some things to go do versus realizing, oh no, they got to change their behavior. So for example, when we've talked about that before in this podcast, when you really were doing some real internal stuff to work through some past trauma and things like that, you had to change habits. Like, it wasn't just like, you're like, okay, I'm just going to therapy. You're like, no, I had to change habits. You had to make tough decisions. You had to lose, time with your friends because you need to have time to yourself. You had to realize like, I'm going to have to go through some moments where I'm going to have tons of probably maybe sleepless nights because of what's about to be unraveled in me. That's loss. Where you're like, what did I lose? Sleep. What else? Like peace. Like, all those things where, you have to lose stuff. And I think that that's where the internal stuff happens. And so a lot of times I'm just trying to put people in positions, sometimes where they know it, sometimes where they don't know it, to where I'm trying to change their internal framework to be able to receive it and to be able to move forward, because that's the key. And actually, if you want to actually count the cost, it's kind of like building a structure that's strong enough to withstand more weight. And the internals have to be strong. And many times we have faulty things in us, mindsets, habits that stop us from carrying more weight. And so we have to be willing to do that in order to kind of help people move forward.
Is there a time where you've been helping somebody else and you're just like, this isn't working. Like, I'm tired of doing this. I'm tired of giving up the things that I'm giving up to help this person. And then something happens enough to like put wind beneath your wings and reminds you, like, this is why I do this. This is why I continue to do this.
Yeah. I think that, we were talking earlier about JT. As much as I love JT, I kind of got to that point with JT where I'm like, hey, not because of because again, to most people, JT's a rock star, but I knew what JT needed to become, who he can be. And for me, it was that whole thing. You can't lead anything you're afraid to lose. What put wind in my sails was like, okay, like I can't, like reality may be me and JT, we're going to be, we're always have a great relationship, but we may not be able to build together. And I had to be okay with that. And I also knew too, there were going to be parts of me I had to change in order to do that. And so, but it was one of those things where like, I just had to throw it out there. So, okay, man, we can't do this anymore. And it was very clear, so much so that me, him, someone else were in the room together. And I'm like, hey, and I told the other person who was in the room, if this starts to go sideways and I continue I'm going to make it work, you literally have permission to tell me, to remind me of this moment, to like, nope, we're all done. And so that was a cost, because that's drawing a line as well. So yeah, I think that's what put wind in my sails. I think when I started getting deflated, it's when I feel like I care more about it than they actually care about it. That's when I do that. And the thing is, that's not on them. That's my unhealthy. That's unhealthy in me, because I'm not responsible. Like I said, if I'm not responsible for them, I'm responsible to them. And when I start feeling like I'm responsible for them, that's when you're getting out of balance. Well, hey guys, I hope today was helpful for you. Again, here on the New Rules Pod, this idea about authentic leadership, what we want to really try to do is give you just raw, uncut, the real stuff, like the real parts of being a leader, the stuff that no one really wants to talk consistently about, the stuff that's not very glamorous, the stuff that doesn't get a bunch of probably likes and views, because honestly, a lot of leadership is just inviting you to die to yourself. Really good leadership. It's just an invitation to die to yourself. And that's incredibly painful, especially in a world that does that literally pushes the opposite. That pushes you, hey, don't die. Just whatever your inclinations are, whatever the things you want to do, go do them. But actually, leadership is actually denying yourself so that others may have the ability to flourish. And so, but I would encourage you that, man, wherever you're at, just what's the one thing? What's the one area right now to where you say, I can give this up in order to continue to be a better leader? And so listen to it, write things down, try to take that next step. And until next time, keep writing new rules.